can we also invite Rebecca and Louise back onto video, and then we can sort of extend this into the more panel discussion. Thank you ever so much, Mark, for that presentation. So, I mean, well, the question is, have we got any questions from the audience that they'd like to ask the panel in general that we can discuss? I mean, so just to sort of kick off, one of the things as I was listening to the various presentations, I mean, open innovation in the past has been a buzzword where people openly collaborate and sort of share their questions to see what answers come up. What do you see in your areas where open innovation has helped or could help in the future? So well, let's go to Louise first.
I think open innovation is where we need to connect farmers and consumers more, so that we are more aware of the key questions that consumers have around their food, and how we go forward. If we're thinking around, and also how we solve solutions, how we provide solutions in the food supply chain. I think potentially, as we look at becoming more efficient in what we do, many of the technologies will be outside of the food supply chain. So open innovation is really important. We talked about cybersecurity and aspects such as that. So I think being able to define the key questions or challenges, and then to be able to put those more widely. And I think the local industrial strategy by Gloucestershire LEP is really interesting, because cybersecurity and agri-technology sit central to that, and a wish to bring a whole range of sectors together.
Well, obviously, here in Agri Innovation, it's important for us to listen to what the industry questions are, and actually them linking up with the expertise in the university provides them with that cutting edge research information which helps them to move forward. So a really important part of sharing that question and working together to work out ways that are at the top of the game, that are cutting edge, and that do have the full range of information for that industry to move forward. Yeah, so really important to have those collaborations and open innovation going on.
Mark, any in your area?
I mean, I think the area that I work in can seem, quite high tech and inaccessible for, sort of wider engagement and innovation. But I think we are seeing a lot of innovation at the moment in low-cost measures for measuring air pollution. So I mentioned the diffusion tubes, but there are kind of a large number of methods that lie between the diffusion tube on the one hand and the very high £10,000 instrument on the other hand, some of which are great and really good value and give useful data, and some of which are terrible and are basically generate random numbers. But there's definitely opportunities for innovation and improvement there, and a lot of institutes in the UK and as well as around the world are engaged in that. So that's a really positive trend, I think, towards, and that enables people to be involved in measuring their own air quality, which I think is really useful. That kind of hands-on understanding of using the equipment, carrying it around, seeing what the levels are, gives you a real kind of understanding and engagement with what is otherwise quite a, it's difficult to understand. It's all numbers, you can't see the pollution. It's just a number on a spreadsheet or something. So I think that's very positive. And I think we're also developing some very innovative ways of analysing data. So it does kind of build into the sort of the big data kind of agenda, but there are some specific tools which look at, for example, if you're measuring air pollution and meteorology at a particular location, that gives you a value or concentration on average. But what you can do is then start to analyze that, break it down by time of day, by wind direction, and you can start to see, well, there's a source, a smaller source that's close to the northwest, and a bigger source that's over there to the east, and one that only happens in the morning rush hour. So you can then start to to understand and get a lot more value out of the data than otherwise. So those kind of techniques are developing amongst sort of the data analysis community, and that's a very collaborative process at the moment. So yeah,
it's kind of a crowdsourcing approach, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It is crowdsourcing, and I think, colleagues in the academic sector will will perhaps comment on this, but I think, to me, the big issue is kind of quality management, and how, anyone can post anything, but how do you know it's doing what you think it is, and how do we know that it's giving robust data? So that's a kind of a challenge. But there's ways around. It's not a new challenge. Certainly not unique to our My Little Corner. So yeah, interesting times. Yeah.
Interesting. I have a comment just slightly earlier, again from Steve, who said it was interesting that the World Food Programme had just been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, this week we also heard about the Earthshot competition launched by Sir David Attenborough and Prince William. So how important, I think the answer is to some extent obvious, but how important are these sort of large projects, or very publicly high profile public programs in actually progressing with what we're trying to do in terms of environment and sustainability? And does any of your work impinge on any of these things? And can you see an advantage of them? Louise?
I think awards or prizes always draw attention to a whole range of contemporary issues around the world, whether that's hunger, whether that's climate or other environmental issues. But I see that there's almost a two-track. Going back to what Mark was just saying, there's a combination of institutional high-level initiatives, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. But on the other side, there's communities and individuals who are trying to make a difference in their local environment, either as a village, as a town, or much wider. And I think many of the issues we have will be solved by both types of approach. So I think some of those prizes really draw attention and get people focused, but there are also champions at a local level.
Yeah. So it's a good way of getting grassroots action, isn't it? People actually making a difference in their local community.
Yeah, I think, just to say that, as I said, having been working on air pollution for almost 30 years, it's only in the last 5 years really that it's become more mainstream, and that's because of this groundswell that that I mentioned and Louise mentioned, and I think that's really what has led to some of these, the recent initiatives like the phasing out of petrol vehicles. That wouldn't have happened if people weren't ready for it. It would have been an ultimate vote loser 10 years ago. But today, I was talking to some people yesterday, and they're going, well, I'm going to change my car. I'm not ready for an electric car yet, but next time around, in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, I'm going to get an electric car. And it's those kind of, changes of people's attitude that comes from the bottom up that, for our area, has made a real difference. I don't think we've had that kind of high level, prize or celebrity input on air pollution yet. I hope we do, but to me, it's been that groundswell that's been more important as a game changer.
Yeah. Any comments, Rebecca?
Yeah, just to say that large programs like that often help. They provide information to people who might be thinking about other areas. So, for example, government working on looking at funding streams, so industrial strategy challenge funds, for example, and it provides information which might give that a bit of a focus. I guess these are not the only things going on, so it's really important that people understand that there's a lot of other stuff going on, doesn't necessarily get that publication, which should be investigated and looked at also. But it's a good starting point and a good way of getting people educated, I guess, in what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And if David Attenborough does want to get in touch with any of us, I'm sure we'd be pleased to take it.
Yeah. I don't think he's on the Zoom, but I'll check.
Hello, David.
He should be. Excellent. Another thing that came through in some of the discussions, certainly in terms of Aberystwyth, was the role that small companies are playing, and the fact that you're trying to kickstart, SMEs and innovative little companies. And of course, over at the Royal Agricultural University, there's the Farm 491 incubator, and Harper Adams up in Shropshire also has a lot of work going on with small companies. What's your feeling on the role that these small companies can play versus these much larger companies in actually having an impact on the sort of topics we've been discussing today?
I think there's two aspects really. One is being able to support small businesses as they go from their initial idea up to full commercialization. And you've identified a whole range of universities with different options where they can access support, either business support or more scientific access to scientists. But I also think there needs to be support not only for startup, but also as you grow to that next stage and you really start to want to employ large numbers of people, because very often technology businesses get to a point where they want a whole skill set that isn't available. And so I think it's got to be two tracks really. One is supporting businesses that start up, but also developing the educational courses, the sometimes retraining courses to help find the skill sets that you need to drive those businesses further.
And I mean, also on that as well, how important are clusters of sort of expertise, and in your regions, are there clusters that you've identified either locally to you or in the area that you work in that are particularly good at making progress? I mean, any particularly, Louise, before we move on to
so I think to have the Alliston Centre at the university that's got both the Growth Hub and the Farm 491 incubator in the same building is one of those kinds of examples of clustering.
Yeah.
And it would be great to see more investment, like BetaDen as well in Worcestershire and the Science Park. It would be good to see more investment in bringing a whole group of innovators from different backgrounds together and promoting that further.
Rebecca.
Yeah, so definitely here, obviously in our Urban Innovation offices, we do have a cluster of small businesses, and what we've seen is that they are very keen on working with each other. As you suggested, a cluster can, for small businesses, can help that situation. They also find it very useful being close to other expertise as well. And I think what is really important as well is having, when they want to expand, having access to new employees, finding new employees with skills in the right field. And that is one of the areas that some of these small industries suffer in trying to do. And so having a cluster near a university is an excellent way for them to move forward and expand. And I think the other thing which is useful as well is to try and have some accommodation and space for them to expand into as well when it gets to that point. And the last thing we want them to do is to move away because they can't do that. So that is something that we here at Aberystwyth very keen to support them on as well, finding space nearby.
Yeah, the sort of scale up space.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think my company that I work for, we are based on the Harwell Science Park, south of Oxford, and that's maybe kind of a, you know, it's been a science hub for 40 years or something, or maybe going back to before the war actually. But so that's kind of a long-term experiment, perhaps in bringing people together, and that's, you know, we kind of benefit from that in that we can access expertise in satellite observations from our neighbours on the science park. So that's very positive. I think as we go forward in my area of dealing with air pollution, as I mentioned, we're kind of dealing with the big issues, you know, the traffic and the power stations, and what we're now looking at is an increasingly kind of fragmented set of problems to do with, you know, smaller and smaller scale sources. So, you know, there's the individual farmer or the individual business, and so I think there will be more and more opportunities for small scale solutions. You know, so it's not something that I know about particularly, but I'm really looking forward to, you know, to new solutions coming on stream.
Yeah, and also quite interdisciplinary as well, as it sort of breaks up into smaller and smaller parts. So having that, as you just mentioned, the ability to collaborate with other skills nearby helps, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And there will be kind of synergies. So the sort of work that Tom was talking about, if you reduce the energy need of houses or buildings, then that's good for the carbon, but of course it's good for air pollution, good for all sorts of other things as well. Maybe good for, you know, for indoor air quality, I don't know. But but there are benefits, co-benefits to be gathered.
Good. We had a comment on from Steve, a sort of question and comment on Facebook. So he says, being Welsh, he loves daffs and uplands. So he thinks the project that you outlined, Rebecca, would be very useful for the small hill farmers. And he wondered, are there other innovations that can help small producers that you've come across or are working on?
Well, definitely, there are many projects within this region that support small companies or small farms, small food production companies, and obviously we have a huge number of experienced people in this area. We also work with a lot of companies, so it's supply chains, anything like that small companies are wanting to link into, and it's all about that community again, I guess, isn't it? And making the connections between people so that their companies can work well and access that expertise and the skills. So a plethora. Off the top of my head, and having been in the role for just 2 months, I can't think of something specific, but yeah, definitely.
I mean, one of the challenges in that sort of scenario is actually reaching these small producers or other small businesses out in the field that could benefit from any of the things we've talked about. I mean, what to sort of follow on with that question, what are the ongoing strategies or ways that could be improved, that we could do more of to kind of get the word out?
Well, what we're doing in Aberystwyth is running a number of events for companies. So some of these small companies of all sizes really, but obviously our programme, Future Foods programme in particular in that field, is working. We're supporting smaller companies as well, and that they are funded in a way that they can do a small project with company, and that's free of charge, providing partners are all collaborating together within the project. And I think it's that kind of support that is really important for those companies. But also we work with Welsh Government and other funding bodies to help them find funding support as well to work through projects with us.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments, Mark or Louise, on that?
I think supporting businesses to be agile. We just had when you look at COVID, I mean, that's a huge shock. But increasingly, whether it's environmental, economic, we're seeing a whole range of shocks hitting a wide range of businesses. And so supporting them and helping them to be more agile goes beyond universities, but to bring a whole range of businesses, groups together, I think it's really important. But also what we're doing at the university is developing a whole set of webinars, doing them in the evenings as well for small businesses. So our business school is developing a whole set of interaction, and for us to think about how we package our information so it's more accessible, so that businesses can access it when they have the time, rather than being perhaps more structured in events and programs in the past.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a change that's happened with COVID, hasn't it? That so much more is happening online, and that's obviously, it means we can't be in the same room today, which is disappointing. But it does mean that it's easier for someone to access something like you were just describing in an evening when it's at the time that suits them. And I was also wondering how social media fits into this. How does a small business, amid all the kind of the welter of information and stuff that's potentially out there, how do they zero in on the Aber Innovation Centre and go, yeah, this is the one for me? I don't have an answer. It's more a question really, but I'm sure there is a way that can be done through social media. I'm definitely not the person to advise on how to do it.
We have a marketing team who do a lot of social media work, but we've also been running tours in Aber Innovation as well. So a company can book on to a tour through Eventbrite, and we've been giving them tours of the whole building, so they get a feel for what we can do there, and then we would also introduce them to some of the expertise as well. So in that respect, social media is really important.
Right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat nor on Facebook. So we've kept remarkably to time. It's been a really fascinating morning and thoroughly enjoyed the range of topics we've discussed. So thank you ever so much for joining us. So thanks to Tom Fenton, who obviously had to leave a little bit earlier, but also Louise Manning, Rebecca Charnock and Mark Broomfield for their contributions today. It's been excellent. It is being recorded, so I will put the segments out on our YouTube channel. And when I stop the event, we all fall off, I'm afraid. So thank you ever so much for joining. Thank you for the attendees in the background and for everybody on Facebook as well. And see you tomorrow for those that are coming along to the family show in the morning. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.